that brings us to the next session, which is investing in human capital, future leaders investing in human capital. And I have nobody better but Andrew Chon, founder and CEO of ACI HR Solutions, to talk about some of the initiatives, challenges, what you can do to bring people. The stage is all yours.
Thank you. Well, I won't be talking about it, but my esteemed panelists will be, and it's actually a really good segue from the last session that we did yesterday, which I think was very well received, which was the panel of graduates and interns. So if I can introduce my panel, if I can introduce Chip Rogers, who's the President and CEO of the American Hotel and Lodging Association on stage, Stefano Baronci, who's the Director General of Airport Council International Asia Pacific, and also Audra Morrice, who's, well, I mean, you know, without introduction really, because she was just all over the dinner yesterday giving us, I guess, an MBA on oysters, but Masterchef Singapore, host and judge, cook and author. So if I can invite you on stage. Now, Chip, you only just flew in last night. So you missed our little session yesterday with 3 intelligent graduates, interns, who everybody in the audience was pitching them jobs, because we talked about yesterday how difficult it is to find staff. And so I'm going to allow you the opportunity. And sorry, before I start, I totally forgot, we actually also have a 4th panelist, who's actually Kaye Chon, who's actually virtually on the screen, and Kaye, who's well, I'm so sorry, Kaye, who is, where are you at the moment, Kaye? I don't have that on my list, but Kaye, I think, is in Hong Kong. There you go. He's Hong Kong. Well, you don't have quarantine now, so I don't know why you're not here, Kaye. Back to Chris. I guess my question is pitching to the youth. I mean, how is your sector, how's the hospitality sector, particularly in America, pitching careers to fresh graduates? And I guess, what is that pitch now compared to what it was pre-COVID?
Well, I think first we should probably outline the severity of the labor situation in the U.S., which I know is fairly common around the globe, but I know the U.S., I'll give you the U.S. numbers. About 3 months ago, we polled all of our members, and we represent about 35,000 members in the U.S., most of the hotels in the United States, all the 14 largest brands, from Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, all global brands, suppliers, management companies, so pretty much anyone that touches the hotel industry is part of our association. So we think that the information we pull from them is pretty solid. So if you go back about 3 months ago, we polled our members and said, are you having staffing shortages, and are these shortages impacting your daily operations? 91% said yes. That was 3 months ago.
Recording in progress.
I'm glad you're recording it. This is important stuff. So 91% said yes. 3 months later, the problem is so much better, because now only 87% say that they're having staffing shortages that are impacting operations. I know of a number of hoteliers. In fact, I was just at a resort in the southeastern United States where they're still closing down every day 15% of their rooms just because they don't have personnel to clean those rooms. So that's the context of the labor challenge that each company is facing. I had the 5 largest management companies in the United States in my office recently, and I asked the question, what are the 3 things that are keeping you awake at night? And the first gentleman summed it up best for everybody. He said, the 3 things that are my biggest challenges today are labor, labor, and labor. And so that's the environment we're working in. So we began about 1.5 years ago of really trying to refocus our efforts to promote the industry in and around this idea of building a career. I think most people in the United States look at the hotel industry and they say to themselves, okay, there's 2 jobs I can do. I can clean rooms or I can work at the front desk. everybody in this room knows that that is a very limited view of what our industry does, because there are about 200 career pathways in the United States. What's interesting that we've seen, you asked the question about what's happening in and around recruiting employees today compared to pre-pandemic. One thing is the pay has gone up dramatically. Pay in the hotel sector in the U.S. has outpaced pay in the rest of the U.S. economy by better than 70%. And wages everywhere are going up considerably. Wages are at their highest point ever. Flexibility is at its best point ever. It used to be if you were a housekeeper in the U.S., you could expect you're going to show up at 7 a.m. in the morning and you're going to go home at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. That is no longer the case. If you show up at a hotel and you say, I want to be a housekeeper, they will basically say, what hours do you want? What days do you want? We'll pay you instantly the moment you get finished with your shift. Please just help us. Now, I'll close with this, and this is the real problem that we're facing, is that the quit rate or the turnover rate in the U.S. is higher than any other industry and has been that way month after month after month for going on 2 years now. The desperation of hotel operators to find people and get them working immediately has prevented us from training those same people and investing in them in a way that will keep them around. Because as we poll hotel workers, they tell us again and again, what I want is proper training. What I want is to know that my employer is investing in me. Instead, what's happening is the desperate need to recoup all those losses from the first year and a half of COVID means that when you start working, usually they will send you into a room to start cleaning a room immediately. And we know for a fact that the number one time that someone is going to quit their job if they're a housekeeper is 3 weeks after they've started, because we are not investing in them. But if you're the poor hotel operator, on one hand, you're trying to make up for all these losses. You have this huge demand of people wanting to stay at your hotel. You've got someone who's willing to work, and you want to put them to work as fast as you can. That is the challenge that we're facing.
And Stefano, are you seeing similar in the aviation sector? Because I know I've started flying a lot more recently, but you know, now I'm having to go to the airport 3, sometimes 4 hours before departure time, because it's always sort of that check-in, and I'm also trying not to check my bags in. Are you also seeing similar challenges in the aviation industry, and how are you communicating to attracting talents into the sector?
Yeah, we have to make a distinction here in terms of regions. The peculiarity of the Asia-Pacific region is that because of the massive volumes of travel restrictions, traffic did not materialize for a long time. And this meant that airports, airlines, and other aviation stakeholders had and still continue to have the time to prepare to a progressive growth in traffic. Of course, there are exceptions, because a country like India did recover very fast. Secondly, I think that some policies at public level, and even through the companies, the airport companies in particular, have proactively prevented this problem. So employees were retained, and we did not experience the same phenomena that occurred in Europe and North America, for example. And thirdly, I have to say, we learned from what was happening in the other regions. So since Europe, during the summer, and North America as well, domestically reopened very quickly, we looked at them, and we knew where the problem could materialize. So we did run a survey in Asia Pacific, and I represent the Association of Airports in Asia, that demonstrates that as of today, this is a survey that we undertook in October, 65% of the airports that we represent say that the workforce is not a problem, or is a problem only by 5%, which of course is in stark contrast with what we have in other parts of the world. Now, when the problem exists, and is of course with the rest for the 35%, this is normally happening on the ramp, ground handling services. It's happening also at security. and at the check-in desk. These are the 3 levels, which demonstrates fundamentally that is the entire aviation ecosystem which is involved. It's not just at the airport, even though the passenger may have the perception that is the airport to be the responsible one. Now, objectively, learning to anticipate problems like this also means considering that the industry is changing, consumers' expectations are changing, technologies are also changing, and this implies, of course, a reskilling, training in a different way the people, avoiding the risk or mitigating the risk that people may migrate to other sectors, which objectively is a risk that we have to manage.
And Dr. Chon, who's the Dean and Chair Professor in Hong Kong Polytechnics, you probably would see at the forefront with the next generation, with your students, is there a gap between what fresh graduates want in their careers compared to what the industry is actually looking for at the moment? And how, as an industry, can we address those gaps?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much for having me. I wish I was there. Yes, you are right. The quarantine in Hong Kong has been removed. But by the time when I realized that I couldn't make a trip because of other commitments, Yes, I think there is a fundamental issue of a gap existing between generations. You know, our industry is now led by those in 40s and 50s called Generation X, whereas the new supply of these young people to the industry, millennials and Generation Z. And there are some fundamental differences in value system. There was one interesting study by PricewaterhouseCoopers that one very important value for this new generation is work-life balance, which is very different from Generation X or baby boomers who said that I am willing to sacrifice my family time for the benefit of my career. You know, one of the most frequently asked questions at the end of job interview now is, when can I take my first vacation? This is something I couldn't think of, because if I would ask such a question at interview, perhaps I was afraid that I will not be seen favorably. I'm not taking this job seriously. So I think that is one fundamental differences. So I think we have to somehow make adjustment rather than insisting. You know, in our school, we stopped bringing some managers from industry come to class and keep telling our students that this is what I have done. You have to do this same. It doesn't really work because they're a different generation. So I think we have to fundamentally address this issue. I think some companies have done very well. In fact, there's one hotel company, in order to understand more about these young generations, the CEO has created an advisory board, Young Employees Advisory Board. I think that's a very good way of starting, listening to young people. So I think we have to do better marketing also. The fundamental attitude from industry was that these young people are eager to look for a job. But this young generation in most developed or developing countries have been so well looked after. They are very pragmatic. In my generation also, I was willing to go to this industry because one very attractive aspect of the industry was it was seen as kind of golden ticket to see the world, travel. For young people, they don't have to work in this industry to see the world. There are so many other opportunities. You know, one of the industries that our graduates are most getting into is something like luxury industry. Why they like our students is because the skills our students learn, the hospitality and business skills are very easily transferable to other industries. So I think fundamentally our industry has to look at all these issues and come up with a better way of communicating and then enticing these young people to our industry.
Thank you, Dr. Chon. And Audra, I know we've had discussions about this in our little car rides the last couple of days. Now, you're involved in Singapore with the Temasek Culinary School and also Shante. How do you think schools need to adapt better in preparing the students when they're entering the workforce?
So just following on from what Professor said, I totally agree. I think a lot of us that run these organizations, these schools, these academies are a lot older, you know, and we seem to think that there is only one way to roll out teaching children or kids or teenagers how to do something. And I think as much as we want them to evolve and want them to learn, we have to kind of move the expectations, change the agenda. I was brought in by the Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia to actually work on an Australian program, and at that time the concept was the campaign was all about youth. And so I went into, I did a talk with students culinary students at Temasek. And I also spent with probably about a group of 10 in the morning. They worked with me. And what I found out was the curriculum at a lot of these establishments are very rigid. They're actually very Western-based. It's all about learning how to make your hollandaise sauce, learning what sous vide is all about. But they don't teach you when do you use the sous vide machine and what is the difference in when you use sous vide and when you don't to cook a piece of steak, right? So all the practicalities of teaching culinary students, I found was missing, you know, the common sense approach, right? And on the flip side, it was very operational and there was very little sort of essence of, if this was your business, how would you run it? Right. So when I actually embrace these kids, we talked about, you know, the fundamental of being unique in a certain country. So if you're from Singapore, we are a fully multicultural country. Whether you're from Singapore, it really doesn't matter where you're from, but what is the essence of your cuisine in that country that makes you so unique that you want to showcase what you've got to the rest of the world? So at the end of the session, I had this young 19-year-old come up to me and he goes, Audra, I was really disappointed with your session. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've totally failed. And I said, why? And he says, well, I was really hoping, since you've lived so long in Australia, that you would showcase some Australian cuisine, teach us some Australian cuisine. So just for the record, I taught them how to make handmade dumplings and a really good laksa, okay, because that's authentically Singaporean. And I said, well, I'm disappointed in you because you don't actually fundamentally even know what authentic Australian cuisine. If you come to Sydney, it's one of the most multicultural cities you will ever land in, you know. I mean, look at Andrew and I, we're, you know, anyway. But I also said to the students, the message I sent to the students was, be brave, be bold, be adventurous, think outside of the box. You may be taught one very simple methodology of cooking, but how can you use this and expand the cuisine that you can create out of this? You know, I will give you one recipe, create 5 for me. But also, learn your Western methodologies, your cooking methodologies, but also learn about what makes you so uniquely Malay, Chinese, Indian, Eurasian, Italian, Japanese, whatever it is. Then be creative, come up with something combining those two together, and that will be truly incredible, right? So I feel as though what's really lacking also is our understanding of what these guys want as well. Sorry guys, I'm just going to touch on this. Masterchef has been one of the most phenomenal cooking competitions, global cooking competitions that are out there, because what it's actually done is it's not just a reality television show. What it does is it actually broadens people's minds about what you can do with food and what cooking is all about. And we have to start instilling passion and love in food, you know. Unfortunately, in hospitality also, one of the big problems is people come into it, young people come into it because they don't know what else to do. So why don't we give them a path to say, I'm going to help you nurture your passion in this industry, because there are so many things you can do if you come into this industry. And let me show you what that is.
Absolutely. Dr. Chon touched on an example of a hotel company that's created a youth board. And I just was wondering if there are other examples that the panelists could share with us. Chip, I mean, are there other case examples of successful investment into human capital, whether it's by investing in money, time, resources? Are there other examples that you could cite?
I often find myself as a contrarian. I don't know about this youth board idea. I know when I was young, I thought I knew everything, and now that I'm old, I realized I knew nothing. So there's a difference between intelligence and experience. And if you don't have the second part of that, all the intelligence in the world is not going to get you too far. But setting that aside for a moment, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is investing in those workers and those employees to show them, first and foremost, the value. Like, you value them being part of your team. They need to hear that. And the way you do that is to set forth a path where they can see themselves and how their career is going to progress forward. We work through a grant from the U.S. Department of Labor on an apprenticeship program. We've been doing this now for about 3 or 4 years. It's amazing that the hotel industry in the U.S., the apprenticeship program that we have, has been more successful than any other industry that also takes advantage of this Department of Labor program. We partner with our friends at the National Restaurant Association. They do a great job, but ours is even more impressive than theirs. As I mentioned a moment ago, we can see this materialize in the turnover rate of those who go through the program, those who do not. So the general turnover rate of an on-site hotel employee in the United States is more than 100%. So you're going to lose your entire staff every year. That's how bad it is. The retention rate of folks who go through our program for the apprenticeship program, which lasts 9 months, but that retention rate is over 90% now. So dramatically different. Now, it takes time, it takes investment, but what you get out of it is an employee that is fully bought into what you're trying to accomplish. They see a pathway in their own personal career, but more importantly, they understand that you are willing to invest in them so that they can be successful.
Brilliant. And Stefano?
I think one good example that we can find in operation at many airports in the Middle East included is the use of technology. So the use of technology is not simply to serve the people, but also to keep the people at the center of it. When we do introduce pass-through systems that allow the passenger to experience the process in a much quicker and comfortable way, for example, through iris scanning, is because not only we want to save time, but also because we want to redeploy the people that were used to mechanically repeating the same task of looking at the monitor for the X-ray screening to something that has more to do with assisting the passenger, understanding if there is a problem, so the so-called people behavior analysis. So this has a twofold objective. First of all, making sure that the passenger is comforted by the efficiency of the system, but also by the human touch. And secondly, a safer process. And this, of course, by redeploying the people, you mean that you have to reskill the people. And it means investment, and it means transformation. But it's the way forward.
Can I add real quick to what he said? I think it's incredibly important. What we saw during the pandemic was, in the United States, a massive shift of employees who left the hotel industry, but they had to. Occupancy dipped to 15%. There was nothing for them to do. And a lot of them went into Amazon and Walmart for distributing packages, right? In fact, it was something like in 2020, almost 20% of the private sector jobs in the US were created by those two behemoth global companies. We're now seeing those folks come back. They're not all coming back to hospitality. They're going other places. But I think it's exactly to your point. At the end of the day, even if you have great pay, great benefits, you get to pick your own schedule, you get instant pay, stocking shelves and delivering packages is still stocking shelves and delivering packages. What's you just mentioned there that I think is so important, what our industry needs to highlight is If I work in the hospitality industry and I'm not in one of those jobs, if we're able to automate those jobs, and I'm in one of those jobs where I get to touch the customer and feel the customer and interact with the customer every day, now I'm part of why they are there. And why do people come to hotels? Why do people come here? Why do people go on vacation? It's to create a life experience. If my job is to help other people create a life experience, I'm going to get fulfillment out of that. If my job is to simply stock a shelf, at some point, I'm not going to want to do that any longer. That is what we need to sell to get people to come back into our industry and make a career out of it.
So as the industry evolves then, and I know we've got the part of youth table over there, and we've got the interns here. The final questions I'm going to ask you, the panelists, is what advice would you give them? Yesterday they actually gave the industry some advice, so I'm going to turn the table around. 3 skills that next generation should arm themselves with. Dr. Chon, I might start with yourself. So what 3 skills would you say to next generation to arm themselves with as the industry evolves?
Sure. I think before I say that, also, can I comment on what we could do for the industry? I think the way we look at people needs to be changed. The word human resources management was created in 1990s. Before it was called personnel management, just managing people. And starting about 10 years ago, we are using the word human capital because people are not resources. They are not disposables. They are assets, so we have to. But unfortunately, during the last 2.5 years during the pandemic, operators were under pressure to reduce the cost. One way, obviously, to reduce cost was reduce labor cost. And I don't know how many times I heard the stories of employees receiving SMS messages or text messages saying that you are fired, you are laid off. I think that's a terrible way of managing human capital. So I think we have to learn from this experience, truly value people as asset. In some companies, they are now using as an investment or future direction. They are taking further. They are creating department of culture and talent. I think that's even more forward way of thinking of how we look at people in our industry. Now, to answer this question of young people, young people today are very passionate for what they do. They are very creative.
I'm running out of time, Dr. Chong, so 3 skills that we're going to give the young people to arm themselves with.
Yeah, it's the technology. I think it's all AIDA. What is AI? Artificial intelligence, data analytics. I think that's very important. So for the future, I think industry, for various reasons, we are using more robotics, AI, big data analytics. I think these are the skills I think our young people have to equip them with. This is the direction we are taking in education also. Thank you.
Thank you. Audra?
Well, I'm about to create a revolution or a rebellion here, but I really would encourage young people. The 3 things is be adventurous, do more than you're asked to do, take the initiative, and treat every job that you do as though it's your own business. What would you do?
Brilliant. Chip?
2 of the 3 I was going to say, so I only have 1 left. That was fantastic, by the way. As an employer, the one thing I love is when young people come to me who have had a different experience and say, hey, I noticed we're doing something like this. Maybe we should try it like this. And if 9 out of 10 times their idea is bad, that's okay. The 1 out of 10 is worth it. The last thing I will say is learn how to communicate. What is the one thing that most human beings hate to do? What we're doing right here. Speak publicly. So if you're willing to master that, you will always have a leg up over other people.
Stefano?
Yeah, it's just a summary of it. It's adaptability and thinking out of the box. Because the crisis will raise challenges. And if you don't know how to find a third way, a second option, then you will be stuck.
Wonderful, thank you. And if I can get a round of applause for my panelists.